It's my husband's house now. Okay? My daughter told me. She should have read the will first. The rain had stopped just as the cab pulled into the gravel drive. The wheels crunched over stone like old bones. And I stared out the window at the house I'd lived in for more than 40 years, my home. But something in me knew, before I even stepped out, that everything had changed. The porch light was off. James always kept it on for me, even in broad daylight. Of course, James wasn't here anymore. He'd been gone 8 months, and I'd spent the last 3 weeks in the hospital recovering from a fall. I couldn't quite remember. The driver pulled my suitcase from the trunk and offered his arm. I declined gently. I could still walk, still stand, still think. When I reached the front steps, I raised my hand to knock, but before my knuckles touched the wood, the door opened. "Alina," I said, managing a smile. "You're early," she said, not smiling back. That was all. Not "How are you, Mom?" Not "Let me help you with your bag." It's just a flat observation, like she'd been caught off guard. "They discharged me this morning," I said. "Doctor said I was recovering better than expected." She stepped aside, stiffly letting me in. I crossed the threshold and paused. The house smelled different, cleaner, sharper, sterile almost. My eyes swept over the living room and my chest tightened. The floral cushions James and I picked out were gone. The lace runner on the coffee table, gone. The walls were bare. No family photos, no wedding picture. Blankness. "I see you've redecorated," I said. It was time for a change. Alina muttered, "Dot." She walked ahead of me, heels clicking across the wood floor, and I followed her through the hallway. When we reached my bedroom, she didn't stop. She passed it without even a glance, Alina. She kept walking. "This way," she said over her shoulder. My stomach sank. She stopped at the end of the hallway and opened the door to the guest room. It's the smallest room in the house. A twin bed sat against the wall, a box fan humming in the window. "What is this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She turned around, arms crossed. "It's your room now." "No," I said. "That's the guest room. My room is down the hall." She looked at me with something I couldn't quite name. Pity? No, it was something colder. Like I was a child refusing to understand a simple truth. "You can't stay in that room," she said. "Nathan and I are using it now." I blinked. "What?" Her lips curled slightly, just for a second. "This house sits Nathan's now." Technically, the silence between us grew heavy. I held onto the doorframe for balance. "Alina, this is my house. If your father and Dad's gone." Her voice was too calm. "The house was in his name. You know that?" I stared at her, feeling the ground shift beneath me. "Yes, but he left it to me." She shrugged. "Not officially. And Nathan's been handling the paperwork after the funeral. It's been taken care of." I felt something snap inside me. Small, quiet snap. The kind that changes everything but doesn't make a sound. "So," I whispered, "you're kicking me out of my own room?" "I'm not kicking you out, Mom." Her voice shifted into that fake softness she used when she wanted to seem reasonable. "We just need more space now that Nathan's working from home. And, honestly, we need to start thinking long term. About your care, this arrangement, it's temporary." I couldn't speak. My words were gone. They sat like stones at the bottom of a lake. "Look," she added, glancing at her watch. "I know you've been through a lot. We're doing what's best. You'll get used to the guest room. Nathan's already spoken to someone about transitioning you into a facility by fall." I finally found my voice. "What facility?" Her eyes narrowed just slightly. "We'll talk about it later." She left me standing there in the doorway, the suitcase still at my feet. I looked around the room, bare walls, no closet space, a worn throw blanket folded on the edge of the bed. Not one thing was mine. Not one thing was me. I sat on the edge of the mattress. My joints ached. My chest ached more. I heard her laughing in the kitchen. Then Nathan's voice, low and smug. "Told you she'd go along with it." I gripped the edge of the bed with both hands. My James used to say, I'll always make sure you're protected, even when I'm not around. And then I remembered something I hadn't thought about in months. James had left a sealed envelope with our lawyer. It's made me promise not to open it unless I needed to. I needed to. Perfect. Here's Act 2 of your story, continuing in first-person POV with a blend of emotional reflection and narrative action. That night, I couldn't sleep. The guest room was too quiet, too cold, and too unfamiliar. The fan in the window rattled every few minutes like an irritated sigh. I lay there staring at the ceiling, tracing the cracks like they were old roads I used to travel. I remembered when James and I first moved into this house. It wasn't much back then, just a 3-bedroom with cracked tiles and a leaky roof, but it was ours. We painted the walls ourselves, mismatched colors in some rooms because we couldn't afford more than one bucket at a time. We laughed through every mistake. I still remember how James held my hand the first night we slept here, whispering, "Someday this place will be filled with noise. Kids yelling, food, cooking, you humming while you clean." He was right. For years, it was a home. A warm, loud, lived-in home. Then, Alina was born. She was difficult from the start. Fussy, picky, impatient. James always said she'd grow out of it, but she didn't. She only grew sharper, more demanding. I loved her, of course. What mother doesn't? But love doesn't always come easy. Not when it's one-sided. Even as a teenager, she treated me like a hotel maid. I'd fold her laundry and she'd complain I didn't do it the right way. I cooked meals she wouldn't eat, planned birthdays she barely acknowledged. Still, I hoped. I prayed she'd soften with time. She didn't. When she met Nathan, I saw something in him I didn't like. Too smooth, too practiced. He always spoke to me like I was a burden he was learning to tolerate. But Alina lit up around him, so I bit my tongue. They married fast. Within a year, they'd bought a condo they couldn't afford and called 3 months later asking for help. James said no at first. I said yes. That was the start of it, really. It's a slow unraveling dot. We invited them to move in temporarily. Just 6 months, Alina said, until we get back on our feet. 6 months turned into a year. Then James got sick. Then he passed. After the funeral, I didn't think clearly. I was grieving raw. Alina offered to handle the paperwork, so I didn't have to. I let her. She said she'd talk to the lawyer. She said she'd make sure the house stayed protected. I trusted her. I closed my eyes now, lying in the guest room that smelled like bleach and plastic, and I tried to picture James, his voice, his laugh, the way he used to tap his ring against the counter when he was thinking. And then I remembered something. It was just a few days before the surgery, my fall down the back steps. James's lawyer, Mr. Dalton, had sent a letter about finalizing updates to the trust. I hadn't followed up. I didn't want to deal with legal papers in the middle of doctor visits. But now that memory came flooding back. And another, even more important one. A conversation, maybe 2 years ago. James, sitting on the back porch with a glass of lemonade, had turned to me and said, "If anything ever happens to me and you're unsure what's yours, go to Dalton. He has everything. I left you protected, even if you forget it for a while." I'd laughed at the time. I won't forget. But I had dot until now. My fingers twitched with energy I hadn't felt in months, maybe years. I pushed the blanket off and sat up, breathing hard. Not from pain, but from something else. Resolve it was time to find Mr. Dalton. Time to see what James had left behind. What? Alina had never bothered to read. Excellent. Here's Act 3 of your story. The tension deepens as Margaret begins uncovering her daughter's manipulation. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. Lena hadn't even bothered to check on me the night before, but that was fine. I preferred it that way. I wanted to move quietly. I dressed slowly, slacks, a blouse James liked, and my better shoes. Not for anyone else's sake, for mine. If I was going to face whatever was coming, I wouldn't do it in house slippers. I tiptoed past Alina and Nathan's bedroom door and down the hall to the kitchen. The smell of cinnamon rolls used to mean a Saturday morning around here. Reading the paper, sunlight cutting through the curtains. But this morning the room was sterile. No laughter, no warmth, just that sharp chemical clean smell. And then I noticed the binder on the table. Thick. Brown leather. Elena's planner. Normally locked in her home office. I knew I shouldn't, I did anyway. I opened it, my stomach turned. Inside were printed emails with subject lines like home staging, quote, enlisting agreement draft. She'd met with a realtor already too, actually. One of the emails read, we're aiming for a quick close, but we need to move the current occupant to a care facility first. She's not mentally sharp. Current occupant. That's how. She described me, my hands shook. My name wasn't on any of these documents, but neither was hers. It was all under Nathan's name. I snapped the binder shut and put it back exactly how I found it. The betrayal stung. But what made my chest ache was the certainty they'd planned all this long before I came back from the hospital. Maybe even before I went in, maybe the fall wasn't just an accident after all. I pushed the thought away. That was too cruel. Too far, wasn't it? I made myself tea and sat at the far end of the kitchen table. I listened as the house woke up, creaking floors, soft footsteps, a cupboard door opening. Elena walked in, fully dressed in workout clothes, sipping her smoothie like it was just another morning. Oh, you're up, she said, like she'd forgotten I even lived there. I am, I said. Didn't sleep much. She muttered. You'll get used to the bed. Or maybe it's just a sign that the facility would be better long term. They have great mattresses. I didn't respond. I watched her as she opened her phone and scrolled. I saw your planner, I said slowly. The listing agreements? She froze, just for a beat. Her thumb stopped mid-scroll. Excuse me? You're selling the house. She didn't look at me. Nathan's handling that? You mean my house? She laughed softly, too softly. Mom, I know you're stressed, but let's not make this into a whole thing. You don't own the house, not technically. Dad did? Yes, I said, he did. And he told me he left instructions. With Mr. Dalton. Now, she looked up. Dalton. She said like the name tasted sour. He sent something before my fall. About a trust. Do you remember that? Her eyes narrowed. That was nothing, she said quickly. Dad was sick. You can't trust anything he set up near the end? He was confused. I tilted my head. Was he? Mom. Her voice had an edge now. Please don't start digging into things that are only going to make this harder for you. We're trying to help you. I stood. No, I said, my voice calm and clearer than it had been in weeks. You're trying to help yourselves. She opened her mouth, but I was already walking away. Later that afternoon, I went into the garage. James kept everything. He was the opposite of Elena. That way sentimental, careful, deliberate. I found the old file box he used for legal documents. Most of it was outdated tax forms and appliance manuals. But in the bottom, tucked beneath a stack of bank records, was a business card. Michael Dalton, a state attorney. I traced my finger over the embossed letters. I hadn't called him since the funeral. I'd let Elena talk me out of it. I put the card in my pocket. As I turned to leave, I spotted something else. A dusty wooden crate labeled important. James's handwriting. Inside was an envelope with a red sticker on it. Across the front, for Margaret only if you need to know. That was it. No date, no explanation. I didn't open it. Not yet. But I pressed it to my chest and closed my eyes. James had always protected me. I had forgotten that. Now I was remembering. Here is Act 4, The Hidden Will, continuing in first-person POV as the story builds toward confrontation and power shift. The law office was in an old brick building downtown, tucked between a shuttered bakery and a barber shop with striped awnings. I hadn't been here in nearly a decade, not since James and I came together to update our wills after his first heart scare. It felt strange, Walking in alone, the receptionist looked up from her computer as I entered. "Can I help you, ma'am?" I pulled the card from my pocket and set it gently on the counter. "I have an appointment with Mr. Dalton, Margaret Fairchild." She tilted her head politely. "Just a moment." She picked up the phone and whispered something, then smiled at me. "He'll be right out." A few minutes later, the door opened, and Michael Dalton stepped out. He was older, now slower, more stooped but still sharp-eyed behind his glasses. "Margaret," he said warmly, offering both hands. "I was wondering when you'd come. That stopped me." "You were expecting?" "Me?" He nodded. "James said you might show up one day when you needed the truth." He gestured toward the hallway. "Come in." His office hadn't changed. Still dark mahogany furniture. Still a cluttered shelf of law books no one had opened in years. A photo of James and me sat in the corner of his desk, our 40th anniversary picture. I stared at it for a long second before sitting down. "I don't know where to start," I said. Finally, Dalton folded his hands. "Then let me." He reached into a locked drawer and pulled out a thick envelope. My name was written on the front in James's handwriting. Seeing it made my throat tighten. "This," Dalton said, "is your husband's final amendment. It never went through probate because you never claimed it. Alina never contacted me, even though James told her explicitly that all legal matters needed to come through me." "Course she didn't," I muttered. Dalton slid the envelope across the desk. "Would you like me to walk you through it?" I nodded. He opened the packet carefully and began to read. The words blurred together at first, but I focused on what mattered. James had left the house, our house, to me in full, not to be sold, transferred, or shared. And in the event that I was unable to live independently or passed away, the house would not go to Alina, it would go to a charitable trust James had established, a shelter for women and children. I blinked, trying to absorb it all. "There's more," Dalton added. "James had concerns about Alina, about Nathan." I looked up, startled. He never said anything to me. Dalton gave a sad smile. "He didn't want to worry you, but he saw the way they treated you. He wrote this letter just in case." He handed me a second envelope. I opened it with trembling fingers. "Greater than Margaret, greater than, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong. And if it has since not your fault, greater than you were always more trusting than I was. That's one of the reasons I loved you. But I've seen the way Alina and Nathan operate. They smile in your face and tally your assets behind your back. Greater than I. Made sure you're protected. The house is yours. They have no claim to it. If they try to say otherwise, call Dalton. Show them the will. Greater than, and if they fight you, don't fight smarter. Not harder, greater than love, always. Greater than James." I folded the letter slowly, hands shaking. "How solid is this, legally?" I asked, even though I already knew. Dalton looked offended by the question. "Rock solid. Signed, notarized, witnessed. Filed before his death? Unless someone tampered with the deed after the fact. They tried," I said. "Or at least Nathan did." He frowned. "You'll want to move quickly. They've tried to sell or claim ownership that borders on fraud. Don't just want to stop them," I said quietly. "I want them out." Dalton smiled just a flicker. "We can arrange that." By the time I left the office, the clouds had rolled in again. I didn't mind the rain this time. Felt fitting. I rode the bus home, clutching the file folder, like it was gold. I stared at the names on the documents. Mine. James's, and one word repeated itself in my mind over and over. Mine. This house. These walls. That garden James and I built by hand, it was mine. Not a gift. Not a charity case. Not a leftover from someone else's ambition. It belonged to me, and they'd tried to take it. I walked through the front door without a word. Lena was in the kitchen on the phone. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. I walked straight to my room, my real room, and shut the door behind me. I placed the documents carefully on my nightstand and sat on the bed. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled. Tomorrow, I would show her the will. Tomorrow, everything would change. I didn't sleep that night not out of fear, but because of what I felt stirring inside me. Something fierce. Something long buried. James used to call it my quiet fire. He'd seen it the day I stood up to a bank manager who tried to talk me out of opening my own account. He'd seen it when I fought to keep Alina in school after she failed 2 semesters. I hadn't felt it in years, but it was back now. I wasn't going to beg for space in my own house. I wasn't going to let my daughter steal the last thing. James left me, not without a fight. The next morning, I dressed slowly but deliberately. Not for their sake, for mine. A simple navy blouse, the one James always said made my eyes look brighter, slacks, my mother's wedding ring on a chain around my neck. Came into the kitchen just as Nathan was pouring himself coffee. He barely glanced at me. "Elena's on." "A call," he said. "I'm aware," I said calmly. I set the folder on the table neatly, square in front of him. He looked down, brows furrowing. "What's that?" I slid it toward him. He opened it. His eyes scanned the first page and then the second. His hand froze halfway through, turning the third. By the fourth, he sat down. Slowly. I didn't speak. I waited. His voice was smaller than usual. "Where did you get this?" "Where your wife was supposed to," I replied. "From our family attorney 8 months ago. You had this the whole time?" "No," I said, leaning forward. "You did. You just never opened it." Just then, Alina walked in, phone still in hand. She saw Nathan's face before she saw mine. "What's going on?" she asked, dropping her voice. "Nathan." He didn't answer. She looked at me, then the folder, then back again. "You went to Dalton?" she asked, like it was a betrayal. "No," I said quietly. "I went home." Her face hardened. Fate, Adwill, is outdated. Dad didn't know what he was doing near the end. It's dated 2 weeks before he passed, I said. "Notarized, witnessed, filed. You ignored it." "I was protecting you," she snapped, "by lying to me." I asked, "By planning to ship me off like furniture?" Elena's voice cracked. "We weren't shipping you off." I opened the folder to the email printouts I'd found in her planner. "We need to move the current occupant to a care facility first." I slid the page across the table. Her face turned white. "You broke the law," I said. "You tried to sell property that doesn't belong to you. You presented yourself as owner of a home you have no legal stake in." Nathan's voice rose. "Suddenly, this is ridiculous. None of that will hold up in court." She was confused. "She let us help." "I was grieving," I said. "Not gone." They were both silent now. I stood. My knees ached, but I didn't care. "I'm not confused anymore, and neither are you." Alina looked at me, blinking quickly. "So what now? You're going to throw us out?" "I don't want to," I said, honestly. "But you've given me no choice." "You're really doing this?" she asked. "You already did," I replied. By noon, I had called Dalton. By the end of the week, he'd served them both with an official notice to vacate. 30 days. Nathan called me names behind closed doors. I didn't flinch. Alina cried loudly. Theatrically, one night she knocked on my door and pleaded, "Please, Mom, don't do this. We're family." I looked at her and saw the child I once held in my arms, but only for a second. Then I remembered the voice I'd heard in the kitchen after I got home. Greater than told you she'd go along with it. I closed the door gently without saying a word. 2 weeks later, a car pulled into the driveway. The sheriff stepped out wearing sunglasses and a badge that caught the sun. Alina had ignored the written notice. She thought I wouldn't follow. She was wrong. The sheriff stood with me as I watched them pack their things. Nathan carried boxes without looking at me. Alina sobbed into her sleeves, performing for pity that never came. "You're making a mistake," she said. "You're going to die alone in this house." "I'd rather die alone than live surrounded by liars," I said. Her face crumpled. And for a moment I thought she might apologize. But she DI'd single quotes. She got in the car. slammed the door, and they drove off. Just like that, the house was quiet again. But this time, 'twas my kind of quiet. For the first few days after they left, the house felt cavernous. Too many quiet rooms. Too many echoes. I caught myself standing in doorways, touching picture frames, trying to remember what this place had felt like before it became a battleground. James's scent still lingered in the closet, faint but stubborn. I'll let it stay. I thought I'd feel triumphant, victorious, but mostly I felt tired until the envelope came. It was postmarked 2 days after they left. A cheap manila thing, hand-addressed. No return label. I opened it on the porch. Inside, a note scribbled. In Nathan's angry handwriting, "Greater than you'll regret this. We'll see who wins in the end." No signature. No surprise. I folded it neatly and slid it into a drawer beside the coffee filters. I wasn't afraid of Nathan. Not anymore. Instead, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to Michael Dalton, my attorney. "I'd like to have the deed re-verified," I said. "Make sure there's no funny business." "There won't be," he assured me. "But I'll personally oversee the title check. We'll file a statement of record, too, just in case they try to challenge it." The second call was to the local women's shelter, the one Weems had chosen for the house in his will if I passed before him. I scheduled a visit, toured the facility, met the staff. I'd spent my whole life taking care of others. It was time to choose who was worth that care. They showed me where the money would go: beds, therapy, transitional housing. It felt right. The third call was to the county fraud investigator's office. I didn't want to press charges, but I wanted the facts on file. A paper trail. If Nathan and Alina ever tried to pull something similar on someone else, I wanted their names to already be on the system's radar. The investigator listened carefully. "You did the right thing," he said. "Too many cases like this go unreported." That night, I slept better than I had in months. A week later, I got a call from a woman named Angela. She worked at the shelter. "I just wanted to say, thank you," she said, "for considering us in your estate. Most people don't." "I wasn't the one who made the decision," I replied. "My husband was. I just finally listened." "Well," she said, "you'll be changing lives. Either way." She asked if I'd like to join their community advisory board. They needed someone with a steady voice, someone older, someone who understood loss. I agreed. At the next meeting, I sat in a room full of women, young and old, bruised and bold. I looked into their eyes and saw things I recognized: betrayal, quiet strength, the will to rebuild. I spoke, not much. Just enough to let them know I'd been where they were. And I promised myself something. My daughter would not be my legacy. These women would. About 3 weeks after the eviction, Alina sent a text. "I heard about the shelter. How noble. Hope you enjoy dying in a charity ward." I didn't respond. I didn't delete it either. The message was ammiragly, but useful. It reminded me who I had once protected and who had never protected me. Then came the phone call. Dalton again. "There's been a development," he said. "Apparently, Alina had tried to file an emergency injunction to freeze the trust James set up for the shelter. Claimed mental incompetence on his part during the drafting. She's throwing Hail Marys," Dalton said. "But we'll need to respond." "Do we have to go to court?" "Not necessarily," he said. "We can request a summary dismissal." I thought for a moment, then said, "No, let's go to court. I want the record clean." The courtroom was cold and colorless. Alina sat 2 rows ahead, flanked by Nathan and a young, smirking lawyer in 2 shiny shoes. When the judge asked her to explain her claim, she spoke as though rehearsed. "My father wasn't of sound mind. He was emotional, grieving, easily manipulated." "Whom?" the judge asked. Alina blinked. "By my mother." I stood when it was my turn. My knees didn't shake this time. I told the truth about the original will, about Elena's refusal to even open it, about the lies, the forged assumptions, the attempt to sell a home she didn't own. The judge listened without interruption. Then Dalton submitted the notarized letters, the emails. The deed, I didn't need to say much after that. When the gavel fell, the judge's words were firm. Greater than this court finds no evidence of fraud, coercion, or mental incompetence. The will stands, the trust remains intact. Any further filings of this nature may be considered malicious prosecution. Alina stared at the table. Nathan clenched his fists. I walked past them both without a word. Outside the courtroom, Dalton touched my arm. You did beautifully. I just told the truth. I said, that's rare enough these days. He said and smiled. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, James's favorite Merland, walked through the garden. I trimmed the roses. I whispered thanks to the wind. I sat on the porch and watched the moonlight gather on the roof tiles. The house wasn't just bricks and beams. It was memory. It was intention. Was love made visible. And now it was safe. Because I made it safe. Because I stopped waiting to be invited in. Claimed the home that was always mine. They say silence is what follows grief. But I've learned something else. Silence isn't what follows grief. It's what grief leaves behind when it's done hollowing you out. And if you're lucky, if you're strong eventually, that silence becomes space. And you get to decide what to fill it with. It's been 6 months since Alina and Nathan left. No, they didn't call Dot. Not on my birthday. Not on James's death. It's anniversary. Not when the paper published a story about the donation. I've finalized to the shelter. They've chosen distance, and I've chosen peace. Every morning I sit in the sunroom with a cup of tea and a little notepad. At first I wrote nothing but lists. What to clean, what to donate, what to cook. But slowly started writing other things, memories, feelings, and then one morning my will, not the legal one, the human one. A list of who I want to bless with what I leave behind. Not just items, but words, lessons, apologies. Truths. I wrote a letter to the young woman I sponsor through the shelter program, Karina. It's 28. Mother of 2, survivor of unspeakable things. I told her she could have James's old desk when she was ready to write again. I wrote a note to the gardener's grandson, who comes by every Saturday to help trim the hedges. I told him about the books in the attic and asked him to promise me one thing. Keep reading, even when life tries to pull you away from wonder. I wrote something for Alina. It wasn't angry. It was simple. Greater than you taught me that love without respect is just dependency in disguise. I hope one day you remember who raised you on, why she stopped. Last week, I met Karina in person for the first time. She was nervous. Her hands shook when I passed her the keys to my late husband's typewriter. This is yours now, I told her. She blinked, stunned. But why me? I smiled. Because someone believed in me once, and I'm finally strong enough to pass that on. She hugged me so tightly it hurt. But it was the good kind of hurt, the kind that reminds you your heart's still working. Sometimes. I walked through the house and touched the door frames like James used to. He believed homes had memories in the wood, like tree rings. I believe that too. And now I know this place won't remember the shouting, the lies, or the slammed doors. It will remember the woman who came back, who faced the fire and walked through it without burning down. There's a bench under the oak tree now. James loved that tree. It's where he used to read aloud when Alina was small and still soft and good. I sit there in the evenings with my tea, my notebook, and the breeze. Not waiting, just being, living. I don't know if Alina will ever come back. Or if she ever understand what she lost, but I do know this. I didn't open the will for revenge. I opened it for truth. And what I found wasn't just legal power, it was personal clarity. This house is mine, but more importantly, I am mine. And no daughter, no lie, no betrayal can ever take that from me again.